Welcome back to She Asked, Tools for Practical Hope, the podcast where we rewrite the narratives that keep us stuck and learn how to move through life's pivots with more courage, clarity, and self-trust. I'm your host, Anna McBride, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a therapist, coach, and a believer that the moments that humble us are often the moments that transform us. If you're navigating a major life transition, whether that's a divorce, reinvention, grief, career shifts, dating after divorce, or heartbreak, or simply asking yourself, what now? I want you to know you don't have to do it alone. Through my private coaching work, workshops, and retreats, I help women reconnect to their life's purpose and create lives that align more fully with who they are. You can learn more about working with me at annamcbride.com, and we'll leave the information in the show notes. Today's conversation is such an important one because we're talking about something many women feel intimidated by, but rarely talk about. Money, real estate, and asking the right questions, and the fear of making the wrong decision. I know about a little bit about this. And honestly, we're also talking about perfectionism. Today's guest is Bettina Miraglia, a transactional New York City real estate attorney with nearly 30 years of experience representing both developers and individual buyers in one of the most complex real estate markets in the world. Tina has guided everyone from first-time home buyers to purchasers of multi-million-dollar properties. And what stood out to me immediately about her wasn't just her expertise, it was her humanity. Because beneath contracts, condos, and closings is someone who deeply understands what fear, pressure, perfectionism, and uncertainty can do to people during a major life transaction. Tina, welcome to She Asked. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you, Anna. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. This is going to be such a great, important conversation.
Absolutely. So let's get to it. We like to begin each episode with a story. So, Tina, before we get into bigger themes today, I'd love for you to start with a story. You've mentioned in our previous conversations about having almost 30 years in a New York City real estate experience. There are endless stories you can tell, I'm sure, but is there one client conversation or experience that immediately comes to mind when you think about women, fear, and navigating major financial decisions?
Oh, there's so many. So, as you said, I'm practicing now almost 30 years, and it's a lot of transactions. New York City real estate is about volume, right? So, there's so many stories, but here's one that always comes to mind for me. And it really goes to what you said earlier about my practice. My practice really is twofold, which is, I think, highly unusual in New York City. So I represent developers, and we have buildings that they're building, and we've got condominiums from 3 to 200 in any of these buildings. I have, I don't know, 20 buildings right now I'm juggling. But then I also represent individuals who are buying and selling co-ops, condos, multifamily homes, single family homes in Westchester. And so here's one where it really overlapped a little bit. And I'm really glad I was able to help this woman out. So this was many years ago, like before COVID. This woman had called me. She had been given a list of names for lawyers. Her and her husband were going to be buying a condo in a new development from a sponsor. And I said, oh, I love that. That's my world. I write those offering plans. I know the AG regs. So I would love to represent you, but by the end of the day, you have to do what's right for you. And she made a decision based on, I think, fees and price, and she went with someone else. And then about a year later, she calls me up and she says, so you probably don't remember me. I called you a year ago. We ended up retaining someone else. And right now, I need to get out of this contract and I need to get my deposit back. And my lawyer, the one she hired, he told her, no, you don't have the right to cancel. So
Mm.
if you don't close, you're going to forfeit your deposit. Her deposit was over $500,000.
Mm.
I said to her, I will absolutely look into this for you. And if you have the right, I'm going to let you know. And if you don't, and I will let you know that too. My job is not to tell the client what they want to hear, but to tell them what the reality is, even if it's hard sometimes for them to
Yeah.
hear that. And so I looked at everything and absolutely, under the AG regs, something was missed. She was able to have the right to cancel, and I was able to get her money back. And
Wow.
that made me feel really good for her because at that moment in her life, things were not going well. And she was actually getting divorced.
Oh my
So
goodness.
that really made such a huge difference in her life at that moment. And I'm really glad that a year later, she thought, let me call that attorney again who I called last year. And I'm really glad she reached out.
I am too. Gosh, as I've shared with you before, the reason why that story, which I'm familiar with from you telling me it before, so resonates with me is because this was my story. And what I didn't know was a lot. And most importantly, I didn't speak up for what I needed. And when I first tried to buy a condo here in New York City, it was through a sponsor. And so before I go on, please tell our listeners, what does that mean? What does a sponsor sale mean?
Yes. So it's a complicated transaction in New York. And I know everyone has a family member who's a lawyer, and maybe you do different practice areas. And even if you are a real estate lawyer, if you're not a real estate lawyer in New York City and you're buying, your lawyer should be a real estate attorney in New York City. And when you're buying from a sponsor, that's even another level of complication. So
Mhm.
when you're buying from a sponsor, you're buying from the developer. And the developer is required, pursuant to the New York State Attorney General's office, to write this 800-page book that my office writes that we call an offering plan. And he
Okay.
basically, it's a disclosure process, and he needs to disclose to the public, this is what I'm selling. Because a lot of times you're signing a contract and the building's under construction. Maybe your floor's not even built yet. You can't see your condo and you're buying off of the book is how we describe it. So you're buying pursuant to the terms of an offering plan, and the Attorney General's office has these regulations, and the sponsor, the developer, needs to disclose certain things. What is he building? What are the
Yeah.
amenities? What finishes are going to be in your apartment because you can't even walk in today to see it.
Right.
Right? And so that book is something I will read for my clients cover to cover when they are buying in a new development. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of attorneys do, because not only do you have the offering plan itself, but you have any amendments. Anytime, let's say something changes, let's say
Right.
they're in construction, and especially if it's a gut reno of an existing building, now they're into on-site conditions, and the architect says we need to change this. They have to do an amendment to the offering plan. If the budget goes up, they need to do an amendment to the plan. So you have to read everything, all the amendments, the plan, everything. It might be dry to some people. I absolutely love it. I love it. I love all the details to see what are they selling? What is this environment that my clients are going to be living,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's going to be their home, down to
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah. So understanding the sponsor sale, which is the builder that
Mhm.
is building and they're sponsoring, but meaning that they're selling it during the building process. And so when I was going through my situation, I first of all wasn't asking enough questions and I wasn't properly informed, I believe. And when I had to get out of it, I wasn't fully informed either. I was told, much like the customer you or client that you described, that I didn't have the right and that I was done. They were done with me. And so I was left thinking, wow, I can't believe something as complicated as this can be that black and white, right? And without any potential for understanding. And so therefore all it left me with was a lot of questions and a lot of shame around making that decision. So this is why this story resonates with me, because I feel like there's a big gap when you are new to the area, new to real estate in New York, which is its own animal, right? It leaves a lot to be understood. So before we dive into these deeper topics, let's let our listeners know what originally drew you into real estate law.
Okay, I just got a job. It was my
Okay.
first job out of law school. It's not that exciting or sexy.
Okay.
I graduated law school, and during law school, like I think most law students, I loved moot court, right? I loved all
Yeah.
the litigation and questioning the witnesses, and I did all the moot court competitions, and I loved all that. You felt like you were acting, right? Like you were on the
Yeah.
stage, and I loved it. And everyone thinks you're going to be a litigator. And then I graduated. And I interviewed at a few firms, and I interviewed with John D'Agostino. He was my senior partner who hired me, my mentor, and he's since retired. And he had just formed his firm. And they had been in practice maybe 3 years when I joined them. I was their first associate, and he was representing developers. And I fell in love with New York City real estate. If I told
Wow.
you, I feel so lucky. I can't believe this is where my life went and my career went. Like, how lucky am I? I walk through the streets of Manhattan and these amazing projects that has transformed the city. I have been a little part of, a little
Yeah.
part of.
It sounds like a timing thing. It was the right time and,
Yeah.
and you were in the right place, which is so divine. So what keeps you energized by this work after 3 decades, nearly three
Oh my gosh. I'm energized about everything, Anna.
decades?
I love
Great.
life. I love
Yay.
everything around me. I just feel very lucky. I love real estate because of the fast pace. And actually, that's one of the things I do say to my clients, whether they're first-time home buyers or they bought and sold a couple of things. I always say to them, listen, I just go fast. I talk fast. My energy is fast. I move fast. It's volume and it's fast pace. And time does kill deals, whether you're the buyer or the seller. It could
Okay.
work against you or for you, either side. So I do move quickly. And I will say to my clients, oh my God, please stop me.
Yeah.
Please tell me,
Yeah.
let's rewind. Ask me questions. Ask me to explain something that I just talked about. And especially if I start throwing out abbreviations, AG. I say
Right.
AG all
Yeah.
the time. I think that's a brand of jeans, the Attorney General's office in my world. And so I'll tell my clients, in my world, this is what I do. And in your world, you're so successful in what you do that I don't know. I just think everybody's in real estate.
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
ask them, ask questions. And for me, I know before you said, oh, he didn't ask the right questions. It's twofold, right? It's also on your lawyer. I feel my job, and I'll say to my clients, my job is never to tell someone buy or don't buy. That is such a personal decision.
Hmm.
All my clients have different, let's say, risk tolerances.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of risk in New York City real estate, no matter what you're
Yes.
doing.
Yes.
My job is to educate them. And that's
Okay.
what I tell them. My job is you should know what you're buying. You should know what you're
Right.
buying into before
Yeah.
you sign that contract. And
Yeah,
so I
that's
think it's
a
twofold.
really good point. I think it's a really good point because I feel since you've had the experience now of representing sponsors, developers, and individual buyers, you know both sides of the experience and seeing both sides of that process. Has that changed or enhanced the way you can advocate for people?
I think it goes both ways because when I'm
Mm.
representing a purchaser in a new development, I think a lot of it is about expectations. And I
Okay.
think a lot of purchasers go into, at least on my buildings where they have their own counsel, I feel a lot of them, they don't understand the process and they're going into it with false expectations. And that just leads to frustration and
Mhm.
disappointment and anger. And I'm thinking, no, the moment you signed the contract, you should have known all of this. This shouldn't come as a surprise to you. So I think when my clients are buying in a new development, I'm able to say to them, hey, when did the broker tell you you're going to close? Closing, time frame, such a big issue, right? People need to move. They have leases that
Right.
are expiring. They have their own house they need to sell first. There's so much pressure there and stress. And they'll say, oh, they told me I could close in 30 days. And I'm like, no, that's not happening. This building has no certificate of occupancy. he needs to do these requirements under the AG regs. And so I can guide them and give them a little bit more reasonableness, I think.
Okay. So having handled both sides helps you to address those expectations or maybe even identify them so that they can become more informed, which I really do. Gosh, I wish I knew you. It was fine.
Oh, me too.
Anyway, what do people misunderstand most about New York's real estate, do you think?
Oh gosh, I don't think anyone can understand how stressful it is. I have to tell you, Anna, on some days, I feel like I'm also my client's therapist. And I'm like, bring it on. It's okay. I have big shoulders. I'm here for you. I just feel like it's so stressful, and no one would ever think that. Do you know how many calls I get? And this is what the potential client or the client will say. Oh, I have a very simple transaction. Well, that is the kiss of death. Okay. The
There's
minute
no
you
such
tell me
thing as a simple transaction in New York City.
there's
Yeah.
not. Anything that could go wrong can go wrong. And look, and it's my job to, okay, now we're going to pivot. This just came up. We just learned this. How do I solve it for you? Right? It's
Yeah.
my job to figure that out. But I think also people hear residential and they think, oh, that's so easy. It's commercial that is so difficult and stressful and complicated. They're the same.
Yeah.
They're the
Yeah.
same. I'm dealing right now. I have the sale of 3 commercial units for one of my developers in his building. It's very stressful. And in the same building, I have a penthouse purchaser who's buying, and it's a very difficult transaction. So I think when my clients are buying or selling, I think they don't understand or realize how complicated and
Mm.
difficult and stressful the situation can get.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we really connected on when I first met you was just having gone through not just, but not too long before that, my own experience of now successfully buying a condo in New York City. Yet I have in my whole life owned many properties in several different states. And yet New York City experience humbled me. It completely humbled me. And so, why do you think people, especially successful women, can feel so overwhelmed and intimidated during this experience?
It is a daunting process. It's a
Mm,
lot of paperwork and it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure. The brokers are putting pressure on them. Oh, we're going to be in a bidding war. Oh, you need to hurry up and sign. And when my clients then will talk to me about it, and I'm like, listen, nobody can force you to do anything. You have to sign and move forward at your pace, do what's right for you, and
wow.
just live with maybe that's not the apartment for you. When you're
Yeah.
moving forward in desperation, I find things never work out.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. I know that the difference between my first experience and the second one, which was successful, is that I felt compelled, basically, that I had to move at the pace that was being outlined. I had to keep up. Whereas in the second one, and it just so happened to fall during the time my son was getting married, and I was just like, you know what? I am not going to get all caught up in the stress that I will either get the property or I won't get the property. Yet
Right.
eventually, I know I will get a promotion. It's more a
Yes,
matter of, as you said, whether that one is the right one or not. It can be a timing thing. And
exactly.
yeah,
It
that was
really could
incredible.
be. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just don't think people understand just the amount of pressure, the amount of paperwork, and especially depending on the type of property you're buying, right? Like you
Mhm.
got a condo, and I would imagine if it wasn't from a sponsor, you were filling out a board package. People think co-ops are the
Yeah.
difficult thing in New York City, but you have the same board package to complete for a condo. The only difference is the co-op can interview you and
Right.
reject you, but the
Yeah.
condo cannot. But it's a lot of paperwork, right? It's going through your financial records, right?
Yes.
Getting all of
Yes.
those accountants letters and reference letters, and it's a lot. And the process, everything takes time. If you're buying from an estate, that brings a whole nother level. And again, it
Mhm.
goes to expectations. I have several estate files on my desk right now. And look, once you sign a contract, the estate has to complete its own paperwork, right? Not only with New York State, but with the feds. And they
Oh
need to
my.
get discharges from the IRS. When have you ever seen the IRS move fast, right? So I have buyers who they're looking to buy their new apartment and we're not even at our on or about closing date and they're very upset. And I said to their attorney,
Wow.
but they shouldn't be. Like, I don't want them to feel this way during the process when they shouldn't
Right.
be. They should have known they're buying from an estate. It's going to
Yeah.
take a little more time, but things like that, it stresses people out. It really does.
Oh, yeah. I honestly have come to the conclusion it's because it's the home, right? And home is one of those essentials that we need for feeling safe in the world. And when you're living in a city that is New York City, for example, really having a place that you can feel safe in makes a big difference. And particularly when you involve money and all this stress, it's a lot. Now, do you think that there's shame attached to not understanding the financial or legal language?
I really don't because I
Mm,
feel like, look, this is my world, right? And I should know all of this, but you necessarily should not. It's not what you do on a daily basis. And yeah, I don't think people should feel shame or guilt or I'm not as smart or my clients are so successful, right? In their own worlds. They are
right.
so successful, really smart people. And no, I don't, we shouldn't know everything, right? I'm telling
Yeah.
16-year-old all the time. And why don't we apply this to ourselves as well? You don't have to have
Yeah.
an answer to everything. It's okay to say, you know what? I don't know. But what you should follow that up with is, let me go figure it out. Let me
Right.
go look into it. Let me go
Yeah.
research a little. Go try to find the answer. But you
Yeah.
shouldn't have to know everything. No one knows everything.
No. So what I'm hearing is a level of accountability to at least go, as you said, do the due diligence, do the question, because it is a lot of money. And I think I too lost a deposit. And as a result of not the process was what it was. And I didn't know. And what I didn't know was a lot.
Mhm.
And so what happens when people are too afraid to admit that they don't fully understand what's happening?
I think for me, it's different because the way I approach my files, the very
Mm,
first thing is I see myself as the educator. I
mm,
see myself as, and when I remember, this is so funny. Over 30 years ago, one of the things John D'Agostino had said to me was, Tina, here's a brand new file for you to work on. You're a brand new associate, fresh out of law school. Read all of this and pretend you were buying this apartment. What would
mm.
you want to know?
Wow.
And that has always stayed with me, and that's how I approach my files. Okay, this would be
Okay.
really important to me. I need to make sure I let my client know that. And I read
Okay.
everything, I educate them, and then I tell them, what other questions would you have? Right? What would maybe be important to you? What else would you want to know? But more often than not, they're like, oh my God, that was so comprehensive. You told us everything. This was so helpful.
Yeah. Wow. That's wonderful. Now, one thing that really struck me during our screening call was that you talked about perfectionism and how hard you can be on yourself when mistakes happen. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I am. You hear it a lot, right? You're your own worst critic, right?
Mm,
I think I'm great when it comes to my staff. When it comes
okay.
to my team members, the best thing they could do is they call me and say, Tina, I think I made a mistake on this file. Okay, I say, let's figure it out. Tell me where we are and I'll help solve this and we'll get it done. And I don't want people to feel bad. I just simply want them to learn from their mistakes because ultimately we will all make mistakes. But then when it comes to myself, I have such high volume. I don't
Mm,
think my clients would have any idea how much volume I do and how much volume I'm handling at any given moment.
wow.
And so ultimately, when you're handling that much volume, mistakes are going to occur. You know?
Sure.
And when it's me, I'm so immediate. This is a rookie mistake. Why wouldn't I know that? Why didn't I see it? And I'm so angry at myself. And then I have to take a moment and I have to think back. What was going on at the moment, whenever it was that I did this file? And then you
Yeah.
think back and then you start to think, oh, okay, I was in the middle of all this other stuff and maybe it's personal stuff that's going on, right? And then I have to say, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. I
And
love that
fix
you
it.
said that because you're right. Too often, high achieving women forget that personal stuff has a big impact on how we can perform in a professional way, as well as vice versa. It goes both ways. We're not really as great as separating as we might like to think we are. And I don't know that we're really supposed to. I think what's really important is that we don't forget that we are human, right? And I was long ago taught this acronym for human, the word human, that it means humbly understanding mistakes are necessary, that we need to learn, as you said, from life. And often the way we learn is not through what we achieve, it's through our mistakes. Yeah.
I
Um,
totally agree with that. When you
mhm.
think back at the mistakes you make in your own careers, those are the things you learn from, and those are the ones where you really learn. Okay, now I see why. And not only do you learn about the mistake, but you learn now, okay, the consequences that came from it. And so you're
Yeah.
more thoughtful about that and more conscientious of that. So, oh, there's so much to learn from it. But unfortunately, so many clients just get, or people just get so angry the minute you make a mistake. And sometimes I'll
Right.
have to say to the attorney on the other side, hey, take a deep breath. You don't need
Mm,
to yell at me, and I certainly don't need to yell at a paralegal or anyone else because we're all beating
wow.
ourselves up personally more than anything you could say or do. We're all
Mm,
human. Let's just figure out how to fix this.
okay.
Sometimes I have to
Yeah.
tell myself, nobody's dying. I'm not a surgeon.
There
Nobody's
you
on the,
go. Yeah, let's put it in the proper perspective. And so, given that you obviously handle a large volume, as a high achieving woman, why do you think it's hard for high achievers that are women to give themselves grace?
I think there's so much pressure on us, right? We always want to, you have to work harder, do
Yeah.
more to get a fraction of the recognition that our male counterparts might,
Oh
so
my
you're
goodness.
constantly feeling like there's more scrutiny on you, and
Mm.
you have to do it bigger, better, and there's no room for mistakes.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So it's still there. The patriarchy is still there, even when you are achieving. Now, do you think perfectionism can actually prevent people from asking for help?
Maybe some of my clients, that's not me. I am so quick to ask questions.
Okay.
I want to know. I'm quick to ask questions. If I'm not 100% sure, and usually I'm pretty good about how I want to proceed and what approach I want to take on something. And if I have any questions, I love bouncing it off my colleagues. So,
Right.
yeah, possibly.
Wow. Yeah, I know that one of the big mistakes that I made during my first purchase attempt was that I thought I was supposed to understand everything already. And that's not new. I grew up in a family where knowing was really what do you call it, affirmed. It was certainly really encouraged. And so as
Mhm.
opposed to saying I don't get it or I don't know, where that was almost not encouraged or thought to be ill. Do you see
Wow.
that very often, that people who don't understand, buyers, for example, that part of what it is that they're not really being as transparent about what they don't know?
Yes. And sometimes it could just be ego.
Yeah,
It
ego.
it could just be
Exactly.
ego, and I'm always again, I like to start off my relationships with my clients. I don't expect you to know everything. This is my job. This is what I do. I have a couple of actually this woman who I represented, she recently sold her townhouse on the Upper West Side. It was where she raised her son and her husband had lived, and they had started a gut renovation, total gut
Mm,
renovation. And then her husband got sick and died. And
mm,
she ended up in a couple of different lawsuits because of contractors really taking advantage of her. And she lost a lot of money because of these really bad contractors. And eventually she called me after a year of this and I just need out. This isn't my happy home anymore where I raised my family. I need out. And so we did the closing, we sold it gut condition as is to a developer. And now she found a co op that she's going to go buy for herself to start fresh and new. And I did so much due diligence yesterday for her. She's in a bidding war, so it needs to be done quick.
mm.
So
Yeah.
I sent her so many documents and I was like, listen, you don't need to know all of this. I don't want to overwhelm you with all of this, You do not need to read all these documents. A contract itself could be 30 pages, especially when you're buying from a developer. You should not have known all of those terms when you were buying your condo from the developer.
Thank you. That's one of the things that I just so appreciate about your approach is that you really value educating your clients through the process. Why is education such a huge part of your process?
So it's so funny. So earlier, when you were talking about in your house, growing up in your family, knowing was the word you used. And
Mhm.
all it came to my mind was my parents always using the word learning.
Oh,
It wasn't
wow.
knowing. I wasn't supposed to know everything. It was all about learning. And I attribute so much to my parents. I don't wanna get emotional. They'll watch this eventually. My
Mm.
parents were always so big on education and learning, and there's always more to learn. And neither one of my parents graduated from college. It wasn't
Wow.
anything their families could afford. And they're
Yeah.
both such smart people and great people. And my
Yeah.
brother's a doctor and I'm a lawyer. And it
Wow.
was
Wow.
they put us through school, right? Working and saving and refinancing the house. And now they're living their great life down in Florida
Yeah.
right now. I'm happy to
Oh,
report. But all I remember growing up was it was all about learning.
I love that. I love that for you because it really is something that's carried through for you in your life and obviously shows up in your work. You mentioned telling your clients that you are successful in your world. You mentioned this before, but this is my world. I absolutely love that. Why is it important for people to hear that?
I think it goes back to these themes that you've been talking about that people, especially when they're at that level,
Mhm.
right? When you're buying these kind of properties in New York, you have reached this beautiful level of success in your own
Right.
world. So they're probably holding themselves to a high standard. They're probably already thinking, oh, I need to know all of this. And so I think a lot of it is just putting them at ease. No, you shouldn't know this. How many properties does the average person buy when you're talking about your residential house in a lifetime? But I'm doing I can't even tell you the thousands and thousands of transactions I'm doing.
Yeah. It's a relief to know, like, because the bias I was bringing into my experience was that, and of course, this is my issues or limitations, is I thought they expected me, other high achieving women, which they all were, they expected me to be able to understand everything they were talking about. And I
Mhm.
think being able to be put at ease that this is my everyday, this is multiples in my life, and this is the one for you.
Mhm.
So let me guide you. And that's so beautiful, so beautiful. So, what are some examples of questions buyers should be asking but often don't?
Oh, there's so many. Look, when you're about to sign a contract, it is a legal document, right? It's
Mm,
binding. You should know the terms. You should be comfortable with it. You should never feel bullied by an attorney or a broker or anyone else. You should know the terms of your contract because you're the one signing it. And I would want to know really certain things, especially if I'm buying. Under what circumstances can I lose my deposit? Right? That's a big thing. I was on the phone earlier with clients who are selling a co-op and they haven't bought or sold in a long time. And I was going through under the scenario, what are the contingencies here? Under what circumstances can the buyer get their money back? And then
right.
they have to go resell their apartment. And now they're still carrying it longer. They've lost months on the market. I think you should know under what circumstances you can lose your deposit. And I think you should also know if you're the buyer, what about if the seller defaults? What are my rights then? Because
Okay.
that's a different scenario. And in fact, the client I was talking to today said no one had ever told her this. So if you're a seller and
Yeah.
you're in contract, I don't know, let's say next week you get a higher offer and you're like, oh,
Mm,
I don't want to sell to these people. I just got $500,000 more. I'm just going to go sell someone else. No, you're not, because that purchaser has rights. And that
yeah.
purchaser can sue you, what we call specific performance, which says to the judge, hey, look, this apartment is so unique. Giving me my money back will not make me whole. I
Mm,
want that apartment. That is where I saw myself living. That was a unique apartment for me, location, layout, whatever.
right.
And you could sue the seller for specific performance and tell the judge, make the seller meet their contractual obligations and sell me the apartment. So I
Wow.
think knowing about how you protect your deposit, that's a big
Mm,
thing. I'm always looking to how do I protect the deposit when you represent the buyer. And I think closing time frame is another really big issue to really understand because you have so much in your life going on, and whether it's
mm,
leases or kids going off to school or you're trying to sell your current apartment or there's
yeah,
so much for coordination purposes. I think you
right.
should try to understand, and it's not always easy to pinpoint. If you're signing a contract today, I could never tell you what date you're closing. You have to get through all the contingencies first.
Yeah, yeah,
But you should have
being
a
able to
ballpark.
understand the timing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's important. And so what are some of the common terms or processes that people pretend to understand, but don't really?
Um, I think time is of the essence. I think
Mm,
even
oh,
lawyers pretend or don't even really fully understand what time is of the essence is and how
okay.
that's enforced. Time is of the essence is a concept you might see more in a commercial transaction.
Mm,
You have to close. It's a hard deadline. Time is of the essence, no further notice, or you lose your deposits. And you
okay.
really don't see that in residential You will
Mm,
see that in the sponsor contracts, though. Sponsor
yeah,
contracts, you have to understand if he holds you in default, it is a times of the essence notice. You go in and cure that default or you forfeit the deposit.
yeah, yeah, that timing thing when it was with the sponsor was really high pressure, which had no appreciation for. And so can you explain the difference? No, we already did this about between a sponsor and a regular resale. Is a sponsor is the builder,
Mhm.
yeah, selling, and a regular resale would be an individual seller selling their property. Am I getting that right?
Exactly, correct. You own your condo. When you go to sell it, it's a resale. The
Okay.
original sale from a sponsor is a sponsor sale. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And what are offering plans and why are they so important?
So an offering plan is basically the sponsor is selling a security and he needs to disclose the terms of it to the public before he can
Okay.
go to the public and take their money. And
Mm,
so that's what an offering plan is. And so it has to be full disclosure and you have to, depending on the building, if there were tenants, it's a different attorney general set of regulations. If it's vacant, if it's new construction, different set of attorney general regulations apply. And so there's different types of disclosure depending on the building that whatever the developer is selling.
okay. Wow. Yeah. And you mentioned many attorneys don't fully review them. Why does that matter? Seems
Oh, I think it is so important. And it's one of those things that bothers me the most. And I know they don't based on the questions they ask me
okay.
because I will respond and say it's on this page of the offering plan. If you had
Ah,
read it, and sometimes now some of these attorneys, they're just it's volume, right? And they're
right.
doing things for very low flat fees and they're just trying to churn deals out. And so now
Mhm.
they all have a standard set of questions. We give them the offering plan and boom, in 3 seconds, I have a standard list of questions. And clearly you didn't read that 800-page document I just sent you. And I look at the questions and I think, but this is all addressed in the offering plan. That's the purpose of the offering plan is to explain to you and disclose to you what are the terms that you're buying into. And the contract, when you buy from a sponsor, the contract says the terms of that offering plan are incorporated into this document as if it was all written here. It's
Wow.
incorporated. So if you are properly representing your client, you should read that underlying document, in my opinion.
Right. Of course. Yeah. Wow. Sounds like they were trying to get you to do their work.
Yes, and I tell them I'm not. I
Yeah.
have all my own work to do. I'm not also
Yeah,
doing
for
yours.
sure. For
And what I
sure.
tell them is, and look, and I'm not against questions. Read
Mhm.
the offering plan and then let me know what questions you have.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, as I mentioned, a lot of my listeners are women rebuilding after divorce, grief, or major life change. How do you see real estate intersect with identity, independence, and reinvention?
So you see it a lot in real estate, right? This
Yeah.
scenario would be they had purchased before, maybe their name wasn't on the deed,
Yeah.
and now they're single again. And so now they're jumping in, and now it's a learning process because now they're
Yeah.
doing it on their own. They're buying it for themselves, and it can be daunting, as we discussed.
Yeah, the first property that I mentioned, that was the first property that I had purchased on my own outside of my marriage in my own name. So it was had many on many levels, had a lot of significance for me. And previously, as I mentioned, I think during my marriage, we had owned almost a dozen homes over the course of our marriage. And all of them, he handled that. Right. And
Mhm.
so this was the first time that I was doing it on my own. How do you see real estate as intersecting with, let's say, with in the lives of women who are afraid to buy property because she's scared of making the wrong decision?
Oh, I think you have to surround yourself with the right people, right? Build a group around you of professionals, your best girlfriends. You see your friends have bought and sold, talk to them,
Right.
and surround yourself with the right professionals. I recently had a teacher, she's a New York City teacher. She had saved enough to buy her first $1 million condo. I was
Wow.
so excited for her, and it was such a pleasure to work with her, and it meant so much to her and her
Right.
life work of being a New York City teacher, right? And
Yes.
and so you can do it. Surround yourself
Right.
with the right people and just ask questions.
There you go. So what do you think the difference is between caution and fear?
Oh gosh, fear can really hold you back, right? I tell my son, I don't know, we're made to do hard things and can. And it may not always feel great, but afterwards, I think you're going to feel better for actually doing it or trying it, whether it works
Yeah.
out or not.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, how can women become more empowered in financial conversations without feeling like they need to become experts overnight?
Okay, so I love that because it's a topic of conversation with my book club friends.
Oh, okay.
So my book club is most of us are in our 50s, right? Who's divorced, who's still together, who's single, kids, second marriages, you name it. We run the gamut. And so we talk to each other about it because we're like, geez, the men are taught, ask these financial questions and know about this and learn this. And so we're like just together trying to empower each other because we all bring a different set of skills and a different knowledge set and background and
Right.
trying to help educate each other along the way.
That's a really great thing. Talk about surrounding yourself with good people to support
Yeah.
you and share from their experience, right? So you can learn and grow. So, what do you think the difference is when we're discerning on what is the right decision within a property purchase?
Okay, so that could be a few things. I've had clients where they were looking to buy, it was over $7 million, a co op. And in my due diligence, we saw there were open permits. And my clients wanted nothing to do with the New York City Department of Buildings. They said to the seller, you get those old permits signed off, and then we're happy to close. And the deal ended up not moving forward. That was something in that client's particular case they couldn't handle, it didn't want to handle. And I have other clients who say, oh, there's an old open permit. Okay, no problem. So I think a lot of it is very personal.
Okay. So it's almost knowing what you can handle and what you need to just say pass on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really good to hear. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned I had to become more willing to say, "I don't know what I'm doing. Please explain it to me." Why is that actually a strength, do you think, Tina?
Oh, I think it's a strength because look, it puts you out there. And at the end of the day, you're going to become that much more educated. You ask that question, now you're going to know, oh, wait, I do understand that now that somebody explained it to me. And now you're able to then pay that forward and talk to your girlfriends about it and say, this is what I learned about this contract term. I think
Right.
it's so empowering. Knowledge is power.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So what does a healthy attorney-client relationship look like?
I'm probably too personal with my clients.
Okay.
They know about my this one gentleman many years ago was referred to me. It was an off-market deal. I think he was buying for $38 million. And I treat everyone the same. I'm going to act and speak. This is who I am to all my clients. And somehow we ended up on a conversation of his son going off to college and writing the essay. And I was like, oh, my son in a few years will be doing that. And he was like, I have a great person to help with writing the application. And the essay needs to be interesting. And I started talking to him about my son who plays baseball, but was also helping with his special needs baseball team. And you guys get to push somebody, a child in a wheelchair to get them to first base. And so I don't know, I talked to them, and buying their property is so personal.
Okay.
So we ended up having a good relationship. More often than not, it's not always perfect. I think I do well with my developers because I tend to just say it like it is. I think a lot of people will tell the developer what they want to hear, and that's not what I'm going to do. So I just think the fact that I'm pretty straightforward with everyone,
Okay.
I think.
Okay. Yeah, I could see how that would be important. So, what are some red flags that people should pay attention to when they're looking at their relationship with a real estate attorney?
I think one thing is communication. If you're looking to retain someone, I know it's so easy to go with the cheapest estimate, or the cheapest fee, but that doesn't always mean you're going to get the best service. I think you get what you pay for. And I would want to know, are you going to be talking to that attorney, or are you going to be talking to their paralegal? And I have nothing against the paralegal, but is the attorney just going to show up at the closing and that's it? You're never going to see him or her during the process. So communication, I think, is crucial.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I could see that. Now, you mentioned intuition earlier. Have you ever had a client ignore their intuition?
Let me think. No, I don't think so. I had a client who walked away from a deal many years ago, and to this day, he still thanks me for it. Whatever we had discovered during due diligence, I think the developer maybe didn't have any experience. And eventually he found out not good things had happened with that project. And
Okay.
so I think he was really happy he didn't move forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I usually try to counsel my clients with, don't act in desperation.
Yeah.
That's never a good sign. So I do think they're all very thoughtful about what they're doing.
Okay. Just encouraging. And as I mentioned, our tagline is Tools for Practical Hope. So I want to just ask you a few questions as we wind up here that can leave our listeners with some practical information. One, what's the biggest mistake that most first time buyers make?
I would say most don't have the property inspected.
Oh,
I find that amazing. And even not just first time home buyers, but I think you should have it inspected. It doesn't matter if it's not a single family home in Westchester.
yeah.
Have your co-op inspected. You're responsible for what's inside those walls. Maybe the fireplace isn't working. I don't know. So
Mm,
inspections.
okay. That's good to know. Yeah. What's one thing that people should never rush on?
And look, I think this is a very big moment in anyone's life. It's a big acquisition. It's the biggest asset some people will own, buy, or sell. And I don't think you should be feeling bullied into buying or signing a contract. I
So
really
their
don't.
decision, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What's one question everyone should ask before signing anything?
I don't know. I'm a big believer, again, like I said earlier, and what are my rights here? How is my deposit protected? Or when is my deposit at risk?
Okay. All right. And what's one misconception people have about expensive attorneys?
Number one, I don't even think we're expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
I might be
Exactly.
charging a little bit more than the average for somebody who's running a mill, but I'm going to put so much more time into it
Okay.
than whatever that flat fee is. If I'm
Okay.
charging you a flat fee, I'm going to be doing a lot more work. If I'm charging you hourly, more often than not, I'm going to be giving you some type of courtesy credit because I'm going to go above and beyond and make sure I'm doing a full review and job for you.
Okay. Wonderful. And what's something buyers focus on that actually matters less than they think?
Oh my gosh. They're taking out this light fixture. Okay, that dining room chandelier meant a lot to the seller. I don't know. They're taking it with them. You're not buying the chandelier, you're buying the apartment. Replace the
Right.
light fixture. Sometimes they get a little focused on small things, and
Yeah.
I think you have
On
to
the
realize you're
stuff.
buying the apartment.
Yeah. Okay. And what matters more than people realize?
I think people in my transactions, they just want to be heard. I think my buyers, more often than not, and even my sellers sometimes, they just want to be heard. If they're
Mm,
frustrated over the process, if they're frustrated about maybe how they're conceiving that the seller is treating them because the seller wants these terms that are too stringent and they don't want to agree to those contract terms. They take everything personally, and I think they just
mm.
want to be heard.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's something that's universal in life, right?
Yes.
So, if listeners take one thing away from our conversation, what do you hope it is?
Listen, I'm looking at it behind you. Ask. Ask the questions.
Yeah.
Ask the questions. You're entitled to have the answers. You're entitled to ask whatever you want. And you know what? The worst case is they'll say no. And then you'll go make your decision based on those facts. But if you don't ask, you don't get.
Okay. Amen. Amen. Now, what does giving yourself grace mean to you today?
Oh, just really feeling proud and calm and peaceful about I'm always doing my best for everybody. I always have everyone's best intentions. I treat these matters as if they were my own, and it was my own family who was going to be living in these places or selling them and needing the money to move. So just knowing I really am sincerely, truly always doing my best.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to even send back to that version of you that struggled to give herself grace during those times when we all make mistakes. I think
Yes.
giving ourselves grace is always great. So, Tina, I want to thank you for this conversation. It became so much bigger than real estate. That's for sure. This is really about self trust, I believe, and asking questions, as you've said, and advocating for yourself and
Mhm.
learning how to move through life with more discernment instead of fear. So, thank you so much for being here. This has been a
Oh,
great pleasure.
thank you, Anna. This was so great. I love talking to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. And thank you for bringing your wisdom and your humanity to this conversation. So, if today's episode resonated with you, please share it with a woman who in your life who's navigating change, rebuilding confidence, or learning how to trust herself again. And if you're ready for support in rewriting your own narrative, you can learn more about my coaching at annamcbride.com or just check us out in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to She Asked Tools for Practical Hope. I'm your host, Anna McBride, and until soon,